here tonight to debate President Obama's foreign policy.
That's right.
But the four major campaigns we're addressing tonight, all for the most part, are domestic issues. And one of the problems that we always hear in the paper, read in the paper, and hear on TV in terms of addressing some of these issues is the fact that we're running a very large budget deficit. And so I'm going to call upon Mr. Al Fishman, who wants to say a few words about how maybe we should redirect some of our spending to domestic issues. So let's give Al a warm round of applause.
Thanks, John, and thanks to the organizers of this rally. It's quite impressive, and it's very, very energizing for those of us who want to work for a better America. Before my remarks, I just want to note there's a typographical error on this blue flyer that is at the Peace Action Meeting. On the first paragraph, it says Sunday, April 2nd. That should be Sunday, May 2nd. Just a small note. I have a few notes that I'm going to use for what I want to present. And the reason I have a few notes is because I don't have enough room. I'm a member of the Coordinating Committee of the Detroit Area Peace with Justice Network, which is a network of 20 organizations, some local affiliates of national organizations and some local organizations. We came into being shortly after the attack on the World Trade Center because we felt that going to war, and the drums were starting to beat for the war in Iraq, and that going to war was not the way to solve the problem of a terrorist attack on American property. Endorse this rally and the objectives of this rally because we understand that if there is no justice, there is no peace. And we understand that jobs and health care are not to be given simply because of a decent attitude of government toward the population. They are fundamental rights, they are human rights, and they belong to everyone. We also believe that without peace, there can be no justice. Dr. Martin Luther King correctly identified the relationship between racism, militarism, and extreme materialism. He said, when machines and computers, profit motives, and property rights are considered more important than people, the giant triplets of racism, extreme materialism, and militarism are incapable of being conquered. He said that on April 4th, 1967. But he was more specific. He was more specific than that. Because in addition to being a civil rights leader, he was a foremost leader of the peace movement in this country. And in his famous Riverside Church speech, he said, he identified the problems that we were having with Lyndon Baines Johnson's Great Society because it was going down the toilet because of the war in Vietnam. And those are important lessons for all of us to abide with in this period. We have had 6 decades of an addiction, I call it an addiction, to the national security state. It was a Republican president that identified early on the presence of the military-industrial complex, and he warned the country against the influence of that complex. Half of our national budget, more or less, half of our national budget for these 6 decades has gone for the weapons of war, and those dollars are dollars that could have been spent on education, on health care, on jobs. workers who produce tanks could also produce the components of mass transit. The workers who produce missiles can have that money go to teachers and schools. And the money that we spent looking for weapons of mass destruction, and the real weapons of mass destruction, were in the Bush budget of 2001. Readily identified that there are thousands of bridges that are now too old to be safe, just as the bridge in Minneapolis on I-35, and there are bridges and culverts and underpasses and overpasses, all of which need to be rebuilt to make this country, its people, safe. And that's where we ought to be spending our dollars. Dwight Eisenhower, the Republican president who was also the commander-in-chief of the Allied forces that invaded Western Europe, who knew something about war, and he said, every gun that is made, every warship launched, every rocket fired signifies in the final sense a theft from those who hunger and are not fed, those who are cold and are not clothed. And we need to keep that in mind. And another appropriate quote from Dr. Martin Luther King. A nation that continues to spend more on military defense than on programs of social uplift is approaching spiritual death. And so our task is to move ahead to shift the priorities of our spending and shifting the taxation burdens on the people of this country. That is an important shift that needs to be made. I think one of the things that we need to do is to help to restore majority rule in the United States Senate. And we need to resist a new threat that has come upon the scene. And we would be remiss if we didn't recognize the danger that this represents. And that is the Supreme Court ruling that allows corporations to spend unlimited amounts on behalf of candidates. And as been said in numerous speakers already, we need to hold congressional members of Congress in the House and the Senate to hold their feet to the fire. That is our job. There's an old expression in the movement, because sometimes we have looked to the magnificent figures like Dr. King and others to lead us. And the old expression is, we are the people we've been waiting for. And that is true. It's our demand, it's our need to reinvigorate the spirit of 2008. I'm especially concerned, and we all ought to be concerned, about the number of young people who took part in that campaign. And we need to build a movement that inspires them to continue into the practice of participation, and rather than sitting on the sidelines. Because we need their energy, we need their enthusiasm. And finally, I want to say that I think for all of us, the success of the Obama administration is not just a question of success for Barack Obama. Because a failure